This is the Deeply Rooted Podcast, and we're here to root deep in God's Word so that we can live lives of unshakable faith. I'm Ben Jacobson, and I'm one of the pastors at Hope Lutheran Church in Fargo, and I am joined by Andria Messelt, who's one of our, I always say this. I always say one of our, but you are the intern pastor at the moment.
Only one.
For now.
Mm-hmm.
Yes, amazing. Welcome.
Thank you. Glad to be here.
Yeah. Have you been on the video podcast yet?
I have not.
Oh, this is the first time.
Yes, it's intimidating.
Is it?
Uh-huh.
Oh, well, it's the same, but different.
Yep.
And you brought a lovely cup for those of you who can't see.
Yes.
I have a large metal utilitarian cup with a cover.
Yep.
Very ugly. Andria has a
pretty teacup.
Yeah.
It's my grandma's china.
Oh, really?
Yes. Yeah. So I have one of these. I have this in my office because if I'm going to drink coffee or something, it's prettier than my big blue Nalgene. So I thought since it was going to be on camera, I should have the fancy cup.
I like your cup better, but I like what's in mine better than what's in yours. Yours is water.
Water, yeah.
Or very weak coffee. Anyway, we're going to read from Daniel today. And, probably there's a lot that happens in the book of Daniel. Short book, I guess I would say, by the standards of some of the other books that we've covered. But a lot happens in it. We're going to cover probably one of the most famous stories. And it's a story that's pretty famous, probably outside of Christian circles, too. It's a story I think that people know. And it's some men who go into a fiery furnace. And we'll talk about what that means. But before we get too far, Andria, what's the warmest place you've ever been?
I think it's a toss-up between three places. I've been in Jamaica in June with youth on a mission trip, which is very hot. Last summer, my family went to Galveston in July in Texas, and that was unbearably hot. So we enjoyed the beach, and apparently the kids forget about the heat because they would love to go back there again this summer.
We do forget the heat sometimes.
I guess. I haven't forgotten the heat. They have. So how about you?
The first one you said was Jamaica, and I'm going to get even more specific.
Okay.
Because I was on one of those trips to Jamaica that you were on. And we took a road trip across the island at some point. That was, I think, about 4 hours long. And I was in the back of a van with at least 3 other people in the back seat. And there was no air conditioning. And it was the hottest 4 hours of my life. Now, with Jamaica in mind, keeping all of our mission partners in Jamaica in prayer right now. And there's ways that our congregation is reaching out with aid. And of course, we have our Mission Jamaica trips that are still going to be happening. And so we're excited about that, to be able to jump in and help those who are, they're used to the heat, but they've had some other things that make it really, really difficult right now.
Yeah.
So in this time, continue to pray for those people in Jamaica. Can I ask you to move your microphone just a little bit closer?
Yep.
So now we can hear you even better. Thank you, Andria. We're going to read, and I'm going to read from chapter 3. I'm going to read verse 1, and then I'm going to read verses 8 through 30. And we will continue to ask our big questions of what do you notice, and what questions do you have? King Nebuchadnezzar made a golden statue whose height was 60 cubits and whose width was 60 cubits. He set it up in the plain of Dura in the province of Babylon. Now I'll skip to verse 8. Accordingly, at this time, certain Chaldeans came forward and denounced the Jews. They said to King Nebuchadnezzar, "O king, live forever. You, O king, have made a decree that everyone who hears the sound of the horn, pipe, lyre, trigon, harp, drum, and entire musical ensemble shall fall down and worship the golden statue, and whoever does not fall down and worship shall be thrown into a furnace of blazing fire. There are certain Jews whom you have appointed over the affairs of the province of Babylon, Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego. These pay no heed to you, O king. They do not serve your gods. They do not worship the golden statue that you have set up. Then Nebuchadnezzar, in furious rage, commanded that Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego be brought in, and so they brought those men before the king. Nebuchadnezzar said to them, "Is it true, O Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego, that you do not serve my gods? You do not worship the golden statue that I have set up? Now, if you are ready, when you hear the sound of the horn, pipe, lyre, trigon, harp, drum, an entire musical ensemble, to fall down and worship the statue that I have made, well and good. But if you do not worship, you shall immediately be thrown into a furnace of blazing fire. And who is the God that will deliver you out of my hands?" Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego answered the king, "O Nebuchadnezzar, we have no need to present a defense to you in this matter. If our God whom we serve is able to deliver us from the furnace of blazing fire and out of your hand, O king, let him deliver us. But if not, be it known to you, O king, that we will not serve your gods, and we will not worship the golden statue that you have set up." Then Nebuchadnezzar was so filled with rage against Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego that his face was distorted. He ordered the furnace heated up 7 times more than was customary, ordered some of the strongest guards in the army to bind Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego and throw them into the furnace of blazing fire. So the men were bound, still wearing their tunics, their trousers, their hats, and their other garments, and they were thrown into the furnace of blazing fire, because the king's command was urgent, and the furnace was so overheated. The raging flames killed the men who lifted Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego. But the 3 men, Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego, fell down, bound into the furnace of blazing fire. The king Nebuchadnezzar was so astonished, he rose up quickly. He said to his counselors, "Was it not 3 men that we threw, bound into the fire?" They answered the king, "True, O king." He replied, "But I see 4 men, unbound." Walking in the middle of the fire, and they are not hurt, and the 4th has an appearance of a god. Nebuchadnezzar then approached the door of the furnace of blazing fire and said, "Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego, servants of the Most High God, come out, come here." So Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego came out from the fire. And the satraps and prefects and governors and the king's counselors gathered together and saw that the fire had not any power over the bodies of those men. The hair of their heads was not singed, their tunics were not harmed, and not even the smell of the fire came from them. Nebuchadnezzar said, "Blessed be the God of Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego, who has sent his angel and delivered his servants who trusted in him." They disobeyed the king's command and yielded up their bodies rather than serve and worship any god except their own. Therefore I make a decree. Any people, nation, or language that utters blasphemy against the God of Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego shall be torn limb from limb, their houses laid in ruins. For there is no other God who is able to deliver in this way. Then the king promoted Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego in the province of Babylon. This is the word of the Lord.
Thanks be to God.
Thanks be to God.
Mhm.
And
It's a crazy story.
it really is. It is wild, just from every...
Yeah.
Yeah.
And just from the very ending, you haven't asked the question yet what stands out, but Nebuchadnezzar, he's like all or nothing kind of guy, right? It's kind of like, skip to the end, but he worships God, but then he says, anybody who doesn't is going to be torn limb from limb.
Yeah.
Okay.
He takes the same enthusiasm that was ill-placed and now places it in the right place. However, still probably with the wrong.
He maybe needs an introduction to grace.
Yeah.
I
think you're right.
Yep.
What do you notice beyond that?
Yeah. There's a lot of repetition.
Yeah.
We didn't read 2-7, but even there's repetition in who he's inviting to come and see this statue first, and it repeats again. And it's kind of like this idea to say everybody who was important was there and on board with this statue and what Nebuchadnezzar was asking them to do. I also noticed that Nebuchadnezzar puts up a statue, which he has a dream about in chapter 2 about this statue. And Daniel reveals the meaning of this dream, and Nebuchadnezzar recognizes that God is with Daniel. And yet he still builds this statue and asks for people to worship. So he's a slow learner, it seems.
Yeah. For me, the repetition of the word Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego. My mom had 3 rabbits as a kid. Those were their names, so I always think of that. There's so many details in the story that I think are really interesting and important. I think about this fire being lit up 7 times hotter than normal. He's so enthusiastic that he gets it so hot that the guys who are serving him burn up.
Right. The strongest soldiers.
The strongest ones burn up. And then there's the details of just the tunics, the trousers, the hats. All of this is untouched by the flames.
And doesn't smell like smoke.
Yeah.
It's amazing.
It is amazing. I also was really struck by Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego's response to the king when he wants them to bow down. And they say, first, we don't need to present a defense to you, which is a profound thing to say. They see beyond the present moment in a way that nobody else can. And then I think there's really something for us to learn about suffering in this. And it's this idea that what they say next is, if God delivers us, let him deliver us. And if not, we're still not going to serve your gods. And I think they understand one of the hardest things to understand is that sometimes we don't receive the outcome that we had hoped for.
Yep.
And that doesn't mean that God shouldn't be worshipped.
Right.
Or trusted. That's a hard move to make.
Yeah.
I think so. And we can talk more about that, but I noticed it and I didn't expect probably to notice that as I was reading this story that in my mind is so familiar, but there's something profound about suffering here.
Yeah. And that they're worshiping just in their speaking to it, and when they get to that, but even if he does not, we want you to know, your majesty, that we will not serve your gods or worship the image of gold that you have set. And that's worship, for them. It's worship to say, even if, we're not letting go. It's beautiful.
Yeah. Questions besides what's a trigon?
Mine doesn't say trigon, so
what does it say?
That's the list of the instruments.
Yeah,
right?
Read your list of instruments.
It says horn, flute, zither, lyre, harp, pipe, and all kinds of music. Maybe it's a trigon is a zither. That clears it up.
Yeah. I've been reading in a different translation lately because I think when you have a different translation than me, it sparks questions like that.
Yeah.
By the way, the note in my Bible says it's a triangular 4-stringed instrument.
Oh, interesting.
Yeah. You should probably get one.
I should. Yes.
Yeah.
Add it to the list.
Yeah. I'm sure just go to the store and say, could I see your trigon section?
Yes.
And if they look at you like this, then you say, oh, sorry, zither. What else? Big questions.
I think I already said it, but just Nebuchadnezzar, what is he thinking? What is he thinking when this dream that he has already had is a dream of this statue crumbling, being crushed by a rock, Does he think he's going to overcome that somehow setting up this statue is going to, is going to make that not happen? Or I don't know what he's thinking.
Yeah.
But that's definitely a question that comes to mind for me.
Some of my questions are, the story tells itself in some ways. I think you get some essence of, okay, these are faithful people who are up against power that is asking them to do something that's out of bounds for them as people of faith. That meaning is there just as you read the story. And at the same time, there's these layers because how does this fit within the whole biblical narrative? Who is Nebuchadnezzar? Who is Daniel? Who are these men? Why are they here? How did we get here?
Yeah.
Where are they? Where is Babylon? Why are they in? All of these questions of history. And this is seated firmly in the exile of God's people who have been removed from their homeland. And so I think that's an important part of kind of orienting ourselves around the story, is these are conquered people who are now trying to be faithful in a land that's not theirs.
Right.
And so just the amount of opposition they face to their faith.
Yeah.
And I think that heightens the degree of what's the word? It heightens the degree of their courage and their faith and their bravery in the face of this.
Yeah.
And I often think to myself, what on earth would I do if I was in their place?
Right.
Let's dive in.
Yeah. Yeah. So these are people who, we just have talked about Jeremiah and how, Jeremiah wrote a letter to the people saying, hey, live in this land and multiply and live your life, but remain faithful. Don't follow this false prophets. And so, Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego and Daniel are some of these faithful Jews who are trying to make a life in the land of Babylon. And these four are some of the finest. They've been kind of groomed in the palace of the king, and they're smart and all the things. And God's kind of set them in this place, to borrow from Esther, for such a time as this. He has plans for them in the palace and among the powerful that are close to the king, and we see that playing out through Daniel and in chapter 3 here. So I don't know if that kind of catches us up to where we are.
Well, just an interesting detail. So these men, they're brought in, they're given new names.
Yeah.
And because I believe if you look at their names, most of them, their original names, Daniel, and then Hananiah, Mishael. No, I said that wrong. Mishael, sorry. I read that wrong. Azariah. Most of those names contain references to God. So they're stripped of their
Hebrew names.
Their Hebrew names that would signal there's a God beyond this. And so they're already from the very beginning facing opposition religiously. So how do they live now in that time? They seem to thrive.
Yeah.
Except it seems like people don't really like that.
Right. They're always facing opposition. As soon as they're elevated, there are people coming up from behind them that are trying to cut them down, right? Which is, I think, what we see here in these astrologers that we meet in verse 8. They denounce the Jews. They kind of are trying to throw the Jews under the bus to say, hey, there are these people. You've told us that we're supposed to bow down and worship this statue, but they're not doing it.
Yeah. It's almost like, okay, here's the plot. Here's how we can get rid of them.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
This is the way. We just remind the king, who they must know that the king has sort of this temper that's just going to,
Yeah, he's a fiery one.
Flip on and off. I see what you did there. How long have you been sitting on that?
Oh, it just can't. It's just that quick.
It just sparked. Yeah, so it's almost like they come up with this plot. Hey, these guys aren't playing along.
Yep.
And could just do something about it. And then he decides to do something about it. And of course, these men do not bow down.
Right. They don't bow down, and it makes the king furious. My Bible says furious with rage in verse 13. I mean, it's hard to imagine like a full-grown man being furious with rage about not bowing down to this golden statue. And we don't really know what this statue looks like. It might have been kind of a golden pillar, like an obelisk kind of thing. But, this infuriates him to the point where he is just, but he does give them another chance, which is kind of interesting, right?
He must like them.
Yeah.
Obviously, he likes them if they've been elevated in their status.
Yeah. Yeah, they have some kind of favor. So he kind of, he lays it out there for them again in verses 14, 15. And, and then he says, okay, so now, here, if you're ready to do this, that's great. But if you're not, you will be thrown immediately into this furnace. And then he challenges them what God can possibly save you from that, because if Nebuchadnezzar is worshiping, well, himself really, and, the gods of the land of Babylon, he's probably not seen any of those gods do what the Almighty God can do.
Right.
So in his mind, there isn't anything that any of these gods can do because they're worshiping something that human hands have made, which is not worthy of anyone's worship. So Shadrach, you already talked about their response. We don't need to defend ourselves. Their defense, God is going to come to their defense. It's this understanding that they don't need to say anything about it. But if we're thrown into the blazing fire, the God we serve, he's able to deliver us. And the God we serve, he will deliver us from your majesty's hands. And it's kind of this, they come to this point where like they're not running through the what ifs anymore. Like, what if this happens? But they get to a point where they say, and even if he does not, we want you to know, your majesty, that we will not serve your gods or worship the image of gold you have set up. And that's just a beautiful reminder, as you talked about suffering, and getting to that place where, I don't know about you, Ben, but like there are lots of times, and I would not even in suffering, but like just when you can't turn off your mind, and I'm thinking about all the what ifs that could play out in my life regarding whatever, but this place of even if is just a place of worship, and it's a place of peace. And it's not, this circumstance does not seem like a place where you could experience peace and worship. But these three men they're in that place. Because you can't say even if from a place of like anxiousness and turmoil and a lack of faith. Like only faith can bring you to the point where you can say even if.
Even if this happens, God is still good,
and
life
we're going to worship
still
Him
before me. And that's even in death. God is still at work. It seems like if we were to break down this story into just its essence, one way to see it is that here, because of God's goodness, the defeated people become victorious. They're defeated in so many ways. They're defeated in terms of their country has been defeated. They're captives. They've been defeated by this decree that comes out that says you can't worship anymore.
Right.
But God still moves in that. And because of God, those defeated people experience victory. And that's the story of the gospel. People defeated by sin are victorious because of God, who comes into the
fire with them, right?
Let's go there.
Isn't that amazing? They get thrown into the fire. We already noted that they're not singed or even, and I remember being at camp as a child,
Mhm.
and the counselors did a play on the fiery furnace, and they're like dancing in the fiery furnace. That's just a make believe type thing.
Yeah.
And that's what I always envision when I see this. And when I read this and I hear the song that they were singing in my head too, but this fourth man appears, and Nebuchadnezzar is the one that sees him, and he says, "Hey, we threw 3 people in there, right? Because why do I see a fourth?"
Mhm.
And he looks like a son of God.
Mhm. What's really disturbing
remarkable.
about this whole thing is he's watching this.
Yeah.
It's bizarre. I mean, there's just so many things about this. Like, they're wearing all their clothes, and what would happen if they're wearing all their clothes? It's going to be more intense.
Yeah.
Because that's all going to burn up too.
Adds fuel to the fire.
Right?
Yeah.
It's just the whole scene is...
And a glimpse into just the brutality of that culture.
Yeah,
like, as you
sure.
said, for that to be something that they are watching and taking in is horrific, really. I mean, that they would even do this, that this is an option on the table, but it helps us understand, I think, the culture of that time a little bit better.
And what's at stake? I mean, everything's at stake for them.
Yeah.
And I think that's one of the things that's difficult for me, is that mostly where I live and in the world around me, I'm pretty comfortable in faith.
Mm-hmm. The stakes aren't high for following Jesus, are they?
Not as high as it seems they were here.
Yeah. Yeah.
And at the same time, Jesus asks us to lose our life.
Yeah.
And so by his standard, they're just as high.
Right.
So it's sort of a strange in between there.
Mm-hmm.
They're really high and they're low at the same time.
Yeah. And it kind of makes me ask the question, so like, what is our golden statue? What, for them, the golden statue, it was obvious, and the stakes were high from a physical well-being standpoint, right?
Mm-hmm.
I mean, they were going to be thrown into a furnace. They were thrown into a furnace. But what is our golden statue?
Yeah.
What are the things that we tend to worship because the culture says that these things are important, or and if you don't, you're missing out, or your kids are missing out, or whatever. And so we put all of these things behind. We put faith on the back burner, Jesus on the back burner, and in order to pursue these, or to make these things take the forefront, and really, in some ways, worship them.
Yeah.
And I was kind of making a list of like the things I can be tempted to sort of, put on, make a golden idol out of, and it can be, perfection. It can be like your health and your wellness. It can be happiness. It can be, making sure your kids are signed up for all the things, and that they're not missing out on anything, to signing up for all the dance classes and all the sporting events and all of that. It can be comfort, like you said. It can be pleasure, seeking pleasure. It can be our jobs. It can be politics. All of these things, I think, can be that golden idol that we can bow down to it without even realizing that we are.
Absolutely. I go right to this place. We do this men's study on Wednesday mornings, and it's a video series, and there's a section on idols, the things that we worship, that some of them are good things, but they're definitely not God.
Right.
And they profiled 3 men, and these guys talked about the idols in their lives and how they came to realize it. The first one was a guy came to realize that Sunday football had become the focus of his life, to the point where it was destroying relationship with his children. And he had to, that didn't mean that he got rid of it in his life. It meant that he reordered his life so that the primary thing, God, became the primary thing. Another guy was his work, and that got in the way of all of his relationships. And then another guy was himself. The worship of himself became problematic. And boy, that list, all of us could make a list, and it could get pretty long. There are many things begging to be worshipped. there's a decree that has gone out in the world that says, worship me.
Yeah.
Bow down to me.
Mm-hmm.
And if you don't, there won't be a physical death, but think about all the fear of missing out.
Yeah.
If I don't make my health and wellness the primary focus, then I will experience some kind of a death. Or if
Yeah.
my kids don't have every single thing, if they're not plugged in everywhere and our schedule's not perfect, they will experience some kind of loss. We think about those consequences
Yeah.
of those scenarios.
Yeah.
So what are we supposed to do?
It's a good question. I think I think we should take a note from Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego,
Mm-hmm.
And just to say, I don't need to defend myself regarding all of these things. I am going to make God the center of my life. And
Mm-hmm.
in doing that, hopefully these other things reorder themselves.
Yeah.
When we make our relationship with the Lord the center of our lives, I think, and being in God's word, we know that being in God's word on a regular basis impacts every other area of our lives.
Mm-hmm.
And so that seems like a real obvious way that we can reorder our worship, right? So that we're worshiping God, and not all the other sparkly things that are out there, because it's really easy to fall into worshiping all those other things.
Yeah, and I think then to take that leap and also to trust that when you do, everything won't fall apart.
Yeah.
In fact, you'll come out
Yeah.
probably different.
Yeah. You're not missing out on anything, actually. You're gaining the best,
Mm-hmm.
right? I mean, there's nothing lost when we put God at the center of our lives.
Mm-hmm.
That's where we find life, the
Mm-hmm.
fullest life.
Yep.
Today and for all of eternity.
So there's another person in the fire with them.
Yeah.
Let's close with that.
Yeah. They don't, it's like people are divided on whether this is a Christophany, right? This like a vision of Christ before he's born a baby. And there are other Christophanies in the Old Testament, or it could be an angel, but whoever it is in the fire with them. Mm-hmm. And I think it's Jesus. Mm-hmm. I think it's Jesus.
I was going to ask. I do too.
And it's so beautiful because he's in this life with us too. He's rescuing them from the fire here, but he is with us walking through this life too. We aren't alone anywhere we go. And it's really a sign of God's protection and his provision for these three who are faithfully trying to follow God in the midst of a culture that's drawing them away and really at the expense of their life. But God's got them, and he brings Jesus into the fire with them.
And because of that, what burns up? Just the things that bind them.
Yeah. Yeah, isn't that amazing? We didn't point that out, but those strong men that tied it as tight as they possibly could. Yeah. It didn't matter. It didn't matter.
All the things that mattered, they kept.
Yeah.
And the shackles fell away.
Yeah.
Which is a perfect image of a life with Jesus.
Yeah.
The sin that binds us falls away.
Yeah. That's beautiful.
And we have life with him.
Yeah.
Well, I think there's a lot going on in that story.
Yeah, there is.
A lot for us to think about and to ponder. Maybe the challenge for those of you listening or watching is to make that list of the priorities and idols in your life, and I'll do the same. And,
me too.
And think about how am I, sort of audit your time and your calendar and your life and your days, and see how are you placing God in the midst of that. And then I think for all of us, we're all experiencing some level of suffering in our life. And remember that you're not alone in that fire.
Yeah.
We'll be back again in just a week's time, and we will see you then, or you will hear us then. We would love for you to share this podcast, to subscribe, to let someone you know come experience it with us. Mm-hmm. We'll be back, and in the meantime, stay deeply rooted.